First of all, Anthony, I want to thank you on behalf of Tony and I for making the time to join us today in the bunker. For everyone's benefit, because this goes out pretty much globally. I think most people in the United States probably know who you are, but we're very lucky to have you with us today.
Very lucky. Very
lucky. You're bringing some much needed star power to our bunker here. So just by way of introduction, very briefly, so everyone around the world knows who you are, just to set the stage. We have with us today Anthony Scaramucci, who is the founder and co-managing partner of SkyBridge, which he founded in 2005. SkyBridge is a global alternative investment firm specializing in multi-strategy fund of hedge fund products. In 2016, Mr. Scaramucci was ranked number 85 in Worth Magazine's Power 100, as far as the 100 most powerful people in global finance. He's also the author of several books. More recently, in November of 2016, he was named to President-elect Donald Trump's 16-person Presidential Transition Team Executive Committee. In 2017, he was named the Chief Strategy Officer of the Export-Import Bank. He also served in 2017 as White House Communications Director. He received a bachelor's degree in economics from Tufts and a JD from Harvard Law School. So with that, we're very, again, thankful to have Anthony with us. And Anthony, for your benefit, I guess it was around March when the pandemic really hit in the US and Europe, and everyone went on lockdown. Obviously in Asia, it was a little before that. But Tony, who runs our firm in Europe, and I run a global practice for our firm, we started doing a series since we were all kind of in the bunker together during the pandemic and quarantining. Tony and I started just coming together to catch up regularly on these webcasts to give both the people at our firm as well as our clients and others in the community just sort of an inside look on how we were managing the firm, but also managing our personal lives during these challenging times. That sort of evolved. We started having other folks join us from the community, both other leaders in our firm and other people such as you. And it's really gotten a lot of good feedback because people really enjoy hearing how others have been managing during these challenging times. So I guess, to start off with someone like you, running SkyBridge, I think, it would be great to hear, I guess around March when things started to shut down in the US, because I know you're based in New York like me. How did you manage that? How did your team manage that from a professional perspective? And then personally, your wife, your children, how did you manage through to where we are today?
Well, first off, Paul, thanks for having me on. Tony, thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun for me to be with you guys, and you've built an amazing business. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
So here's the thing. I'm going to give 30 seconds of my background. You didn't mention the fact that I got fired in the White House, which I appreciate that, but everybody at this point knows that I got fired, so that's totally fine.
I think you're proud of it.
You and I live in the same town. We live in Manhasset, and so you may or may not remember this, but I grew up in Port Washington, and in Port Washington there was a very large sand embankment. It took Italian and Irish and Welsh immigrants about 95 years to mine out that embankment. There's a beautiful golf course there now.
Yeah.
Ken Langone is another local resident of ours, and I built a monument about 10 years ago to all of those immigrants that were part of that story. 65% of the concrete that built the skyscrapers in New York City from 1905 to 2000 came from the town that you and I are living in, that peninsula, Port Washington. And my father was the crane operator there for 42 years. And he was an hourly worker, and I lived in Port, and we had a great life. And if you go down there, you'll see this beautiful bronze sculpture, and then there's a plaque there honoring my dad.
I know it well, on East Shore Road.
On East Shore Road, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know you and Ken Langone built that.
Yeah. If you pull in there, you'll see. It was very well done. Kenny got the designer, and so I'm bringing that up for a reason because I grew up in a family that had a very tight budget. It was an Italian American family, similar to yours, and there were some cliches that my parents lived by. One of them was, if you couldn't afford the ticket, don't go to the movies. That's a typical old school old-fashioned cliche. And so my parents were savers. They were modest people, lived well within their means, and they conditioned all of us to be like that. So, I came out of Schreiber High School in that local town, went to Tufts, went to Harvard Law School, 7 years at Goldman. And then I started building my practice, which was basically advising wealthy individuals. I spun it out, created a registered investment advisor, sold it to Lehman Brothers, a company you guys are very familiar with. I got there through Neuberger Berman. Lehman bought Neuberger Berman. I sold my firm to Neuberger Berman. When I left in 2005, this was before the Lehman debacle in 2008. If you had said to me, okay, here's what's going to go down, you're going to celebrate your 15th anniversary at SkyBridge, and Lehman Brothers, which I thought was an august institution, and I thought it was well managed, is going to be the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Now, maybe there's a larger one coming, but I still think it holds the record. And so I'm laying all that out as a backdrop for whatever you're planning in your life, God is laughing. And we're passing memes back and forth to each other right now. One of the funnier memes for me was somebody said, well, whatever you said to the following question in 2015, what are you going to be doing in 2020? 5 years from today, everybody got that wrong. Everybody got it wrong. None of us expected that we would be sitting here siloed into our houses in the proverbial bunker, as you guys are talking about, and trying to run and operate our businesses, keep our families safe and healthy, run our businesses with all these vagaries and all these uncertainties. So I'm laying all of that as a backdrop to tell you that entrepreneurship requires a number of different things, but here are the 5 things that I tell my staff. Number 1, you're making plans, you're getting smashed in the face. Mike Tyson had that line. Everybody's got a plan till they get smashed in the face. Well, we got smashed in the face. And so now we have to adopt our plan. If you're looking for constancy, or you're looking for no variability or no change, you cannot be an entrepreneur. Number 2, when the bad stuff happens, okay, if you see it the right way, it can be very invigorating and it can be very inspiring. Number 3, if you're having a bad day, I want you to imagine me on July 31st, 2017, when I'm ejected from the White House after an 11-day fiasco, and I'm blown into Pennsylvania Avenue like an Austin Powers villain. And I'm lit up in the international news. My 28-year-old son, who's Paul has met, he just graduated from Stanford Business School. He put a 14-minute clip together. I pray every night, Paulie, that 14-minute clip never gets on YouTube. It's every late night comedian beating the living hell out of me. And some of the stuff is like outrageously funny.
Yeah.
But the point being is, if you're having a bad day, I want you to think of that day for me. Okay. And it shall make you feel better about life. Okay. And my last point, and this is the number 1 thing that everybody has to recognize. You got to roll with things in life, and you got to use your sense of humor, and you got to use your groundedness, and you got to think like old school Italian immigrants, which are, do I have a roof? Yes. Am I going to eat tonight? Yes. Is there air conditioning and hot water and heat? Yes. Okay, relax. Enjoy your life. Enjoy the perspective that something like this is going to give you for the things that are super important in life. And then the other things will work themselves out. And you have to have faith in believing all those things. And so for me, I've spent 105 days. My wife came on before the recording started. Most Italians can survive 3 to 5 circumcisions, as everybody knows. What we cannot survive is a castration. So I'm just sitting here trying not to get castrated by my wife, who, thank God, we almost got her asses divorced, and now we're still together. She happens to love me. It's 105 days later. So far, no castration. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Okay.
Love it.
So again, you're in the bunker. Put the stuff in perspective. Hug your kids, and don't allow yourself. This is the number 1 thing I tell my staff. Don't allow yourself the luxury of chronic worry. Okay, chronic worry is something we can all fall into the trap of, and we can say, woe is me, We could put the black cloud over our head. We'd be like Pigpen and Peanuts, and we can have a 500-pound millstone, and we could say, oh, this is bad, and that's bad, and this is not going well, and my plans had to change for the summer, and my kid didn't have his birthday party, and blah, blah, blah. Nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it. And you shouldn't be telling yourself that either. You should be picking yourself up in the morning, getting in the gym, write down a list of things that you need to do for your day to make it a great day, and then start over and do it again. And so those are my messages to people. And by the way, we're getting our butts kicked. We got destroyed in the month of March. And so, Paul, you and I know each other a long time. How is your performance in the month of March? I'm not a spin meister. We got destroyed. Now, how are we doing now? We had our best quarter, the April, May, June time period. We had our best quarter in the last 8 years. And it turns out it's been a very big opportunity to buy our fund, in my opinion, because I think we're good fundamental investors. And so what happens is people cycle out at the bottom. They get fearful. It's so funny. They come in at the top. They pile in at the top. And then they get fearful and they cycle out of the bottom.
What's your AUM now, Tony?
Yeah, Anthony, it's down. Yeah, but it's down. It started the year at about 7.8 billion. I think we'll be somewhere around 7 billion. But weirdly, we're raising money. We just got a $100 million order from a Japanese institution. We raised $40 million from existing clients that wanted to average in. And so, look, what will happen is I'll be better able to tell you what my AUM is a year or two from now, because I do think we've got great fundamental assets on. The assets will reach their intrinsic value estimates that we've been, I've been doing this for 31 years. And it's incumbent upon me to try to tell everybody, calm down. I feel like I'm George Bailey in the savings and loan. Okay, guys, take a chill. You don't want to be selling in the middle of a crisis. Take it calm. Okay, if anything, you want to be buying in the middle of a crisis, not selling. You guys worked on the Lehman Brothers transaction. How many distressed assets peeled out of Lehman Brothers that were picked off and or sold at prices that today you're saying, wow, that person that bought that got a really good value?
I think, Lehman, and I personally didn't work on it, but it was a relatively orderly liquidation and it wasn't a fire sale. And I think that was one of the main roles that our firm played on there. But that's exactly what you said. It wasn't a fire sale, although a lot of people wanted it to be. And I remember we were getting a lot of calls looking for fire sale prices, but we had a fiduciary responsibility, and it was managed for the long term. I mean, we were in there, I think, over 5 years, right, Tony?
We actually invested in the assets. We went to the court, and everybody expected us to sell the assets, and we said, we sell the assets. This is the worst time to sell. We're the market maker. We're so big. We're gonna depress the sales. So we actually want to borrow more money to invest and protect these businesses. And 15 billion became 100 billion.
That's a great sign, and that's the type of leadership we need right now in the middle of a pandemic, is to calm everybody down, stay patient, and look at the fundamentals, the long-term fundamentals. So good for you.
Now, Anthony, how is all your SkyBridge team working remotely? And if so, how are you managing that?
Well, so, we do these Zoom calls twice a week with the entire office. Each business unit is doing a daily Zoom call. Our sales meeting is at 8:30 in the morning. I sort of run that process. And then I have a series of phone calls throughout the day, talking to clients, portfolio managers. We have some of the larger hedge fund managers in the world in our account, in our fund, if you will, because we're a fund of funds. So whether it's Steve Cohen's team, Ray Dalio at Bridgewater, Howard Marks at Oaktree, Josh Friedman at Canyon, we have a whole series of meetings with them so that we can get our clients up to speed with what our managers are doing from an investment perspective. I think you've been to the SALT conference, Paul. So
yep.
you know our conference. We're doing a series of SALT talks. I had Mark Cuban. I had General Kelly. John Kelly's become. He fired me from the White House. We've become very close personal friends. I've had Michelle Flournoy, who will likely be the first woman defense secretary if Joe Biden wins the presidency. A whole eclectic mix of people. This morning we had Afsani Beshlas, who's running the company Rock Creek. Yep. That's an investment manager, fund of funds, and direct investor. based in Washington, D.C. She's married to the very famous historian, the presidential historian, Michael Beschloss. And so earlier in the week, I had Sam Zell, who's always a character. He wrote a book, Am I Being Too Subtle? And so if you know Sam's personality, you know he's always subtle. And if you believe that, I can sell you a bridge. So we've had this very wide-ranging, eclectic group of people, and it's been a lot of fun for us. And so listen, it sucks. I'm not going to tell you that sitting here in the Dr. Evil chair in the guest bedroom in my home in Southampton, where once in a while food comes through the door, is my idea of running my business or running my summer. It absolutely sucks. But what I am going to do is I'm going to make the best of it. What I am going to do is I'm going to start out in the morning with a ton of gratitude for everything I have. And I'm not going to focus on the things that I don't have or the things that have not gone right. Because listen, if you're on this Zoom call and you have access to the internet, you're one of the luckiest people that has ever lived on planet Earth. And you always have to start from that frame of mind. That'll make you very positive and very excited to attack the day.
Anthony, have you traveled at all since lockdown? Have you been anywhere?
Well, I've been to my mother's in Port Washington, Paul. I've been out here in Southampton. I've made countless trips to Uncle Giuseppe's. You know the place, okay?
On my corner.
Okay. Other than that, I have not traveled. Okay. So I have literally, this could be my longest sequence of days on Long Island since kindergarten, frankly.
Yeah, same
that's
with me.
Fine.
Same with me.
I'm going to go to LA July 10th. I've got two of my sons are out in LA. One, as I mentioned, just graduated from Stanford Business School. He's building a telemedicine business. My 20-year-old son is working with Lil Wayne, will.i.am, The Baby, Machine Gun Kelly. You may recognize some of the younger people who will recognize. I didn't know who these people were, but they're all singers in the music industry, and he's becoming a fairly well-recognized videographer, director, and producer. And so he's producing 4 to 7 minute music videos for a whole cast of very well-known musical artists. So I got very eclectic kids, and so I'm going to go out there and visit those guys. And if I'm allowed to come back into this house, I have to wear like a full hazmat outfit with the face shield and all that other
Right.
stuff. But what am I going to do?
Well,
everybody's nervous.
Tony's
the only person not nervous is Trump. He's the only idiot that won't wear the mask. Every other person wears the mask. But,
I know.
He's decided that he's going to politicize the science of the stupid thing,
So Tony has a musical background, and I think I'll let him comment on what your son is doing relative to videography, because I would imagine he would. Tony has a son who's actually got a pretty successful clothing line in Paris as well.
We're going to have Apple Bunker soon, so mention that, right?
Yeah, we're having one of the Black Eyed Peas, Apple the App, as in the bunker with us in a few weeks. So that should be pretty exciting.
Right? Okay, cool. I haven't met him. will.i.am, I met through my son. Seems like a very chill guy. I really enjoyed spending time with him.
Yeah, things are definitely heating up in the bunker here with us. It's starting with you, and we got a very eclectic mix of people joining us. So it's going to be fun. Well,
when you look up name dropping in the dictionary, Paul, you see a picture of me. Okay, I mean, let's face it. Okay, like the whole SALT conference is like I'm a wholesaler of name dropping for other people, right? You know that, right?
There's nothing wrong with that.
God bless. God bless.
So how has you mentioned earlier, and we saw Deirdre and the boys earlier. How has she been, and how has it been with the kids and managing? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, listen, my wife and I, well publicized. We got on the front page of the New York Post. We almost got divorced in 2007, and we were fighting with each other. We had some personal issues. She hated the political direction I was taking. Well, we love each other, so we were able to reconcile. So there's another message there. We're in a disposable society. We're in a cancel culture society. But, from a human point of view, that's not the right thing to do. So we were able to, we got to a good marriage coach and a good life coach, and we were able to put our marriage back together. And I think it's stronger today, frankly, than it's ever been. And so, the last 105 days, frankly, have been good for our family. It's made us closer. It's made us realize what's important. And when you're about to lose somebody that you really love in the divorce world, which is a ridiculously difficult world. And then you're able to figure out a way to reconcile. Trust me, you get a lot of appreciation in that too, that you're not breaking something that you would like to keep together. So listen, we're doing well, thank God. We do a podcast. I think you've heard of it. It's called
Yeah.
Mooch and the Misses. We had to put it on hiatus during this fiasco, but she beats the living what out of me for 45 straight minutes. And as I tell our listeners, it's a lot cheaper than therapy, so it's fine. She goes nuts on. She takes a cheese grater to the side of my face, Paul.
Cheese grater to the mooch.
Yeah, no question. Okay.
So while we got you here, it would be great to get your perspective on where do you think we go from here? At least in the U.S. and Tony mentioned, economy, the markets. We started to reopen in the U.S. and Europe, and then we're shutting it down again because of more cases of COVID. What do you think? Where do you think we head from here?
Well, you have to tell me what's going to happen with the public policy, then I can give you a much better forecast. But I think what's going on right now in the United States, we have a tale of two economies. We have the asset-based economy, specifically the stock market is zooming. We have parts of the credit world related to assets zooming. Structured credit, something I'm in, is lagging. We can talk about that, but I think there's real fundamental value there. And then you have the underlying economy, sort of the real world economy, and the differentials are getting better. Jobs are coming back. All those deltas are improving. But I think we're going to slog in the real economy for a period of time because we're in a pre-vaccine, pre-therapy economy. And so a result of which there's a lot of caution. There will be less people traveling by air. There'll be less people moving around in restaurants, shopping, and things like that. So I think that we're probably ahead of ourselves a little bit as it relates to the stock market. If you take those 12 or 15 names out of the market, the FANG stocks, plus say Microsoft, you've got a mixed market. Those stocks have rocketed up. They're up 23, 24% on the year. The rest of the market's down 8 or 9. Most S&P 500 companies are down about 23% from their highs. If you just take out the ones that are moving. And so I caution people. I say, listen, the Nifty 50 worked in the 1970s until it didn't. There was a basket of stocks, Kimberly-Clark, Disney, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, all these great quality companies. People said, just buy the basket of those 50 names and hold them and you'll be totally fine. And what happened was those names got to be very expensive. When they got to 100 plus times earnings, even though the fundamentals of the companies were okay, you started to get multiple compression as the bloom faded off the rose. And so Amazon, amazing company, they've done an unbelievable job in the COVID-19 pandemic, but they are trading at 127 times earnings. And so you have to say to yourself, what am I buying? What kind of future earnings stream am I buying? How far into the future before I make my money back on this big investment? And so I'm worried about that stuff. Last point I'll make, and I think this is more related to the U.S. economy. By accident, I'll take you back to 2008. By accident, the Federal Reserve created the Bernie Sanders and the Donald Trump movements. Now, how did that happen? They lowered interest rates. They created a good level of modern monetary policy theory. They quantitatively eased. If you had assets, small sliver of the population, you experienced the boom. Everybody bought big houses for themselves and are living high on the hog. But if you were in the middle or lower middle class, you didn't own any assets, you didn't really catch that boom, if you will. And sure, you kept your job and maybe your wages grew a little, but they didn't really pace with cost of living. And so you've grown frustrated and you've got some level of anxiety. And so that's where you've seen the rise of populism on the left and the rise of populism on the right. The Fed didn't do it on purpose, but they accidentally created these movements because they didn't get any help from the state, local, and federal politicians. There's no jobs training, no infrastructure, no rebuilding of America or rethinking the educational footprint of America. And they just allowed this simple, blunt instrument of lowering rates to be the tonic, if you will, for the for the economic calamity. And so it turns out that the 2008 crisis was a dress rehearsal, guys, for 2020. So we're deploying the same playbook, we're deploying it faster, we're deploying it with larger amounts of money, but we're not healing the underlying problems that we have that's creating this wide wealth divide. And I'll leave you guys with this thought, and I experienced this when I was on President Trump's campaign in 2016. I got on board the Trump plane. I was with him in the cabin, and he said to me, "What's the matter? You look a little down." And I said, "Well, you know, Mr. Trump, we just left an area of the country where there's a lot of manufacturing, and there's no manufacturing there now. These people are struggling, and those people remind me of my dad. You know, my dad was in a 1960s, 1970s heavy labor-intensive market where he was able to get a real living wage, and I grew up resoundingly in the middle class." I said, "Those people that we just left, they don't have any hope of that. You know, we turned a generation of blue-collar Americans who were aspirational blue-collar Americans into desperational blue-collar Americans in 35 years. And so that's the thing I'm worried about in the economy. You know, am I worried for you and Tony, Paul? I'm not. Tony, I'm not worried for you guys because you're, you know, thank God you're at the top of the food chain and you'll do well and you'll figure it out. You'll adapt and survive. But what I am worried about is that unfortunate truth about America that most people are living paycheck to paycheck. They've got $400 or $500 in their savings account, and there's a very high level of anxiety born from the crisis, and there was anxiety prior to the crisis, and you don't want that to turn into a wackadoodle political upheaval. I think that would be bad for all of us. So that was long-winded, but I'm just telling you, yeah, sure. You know, the stock market's going to go up, asset prices are going to return. SkyBridge is going to have a phenomenal year. The next 12 months will be great for us. It'll be great for you guys. But what about that middle-class guy that doesn't have a college education, that's struggling, and he's slipping into lower middle class? That's something I am worried about.
I think, Anthony, all of us in business, the leaders I talk to, are all worried about that and are starting to think we have to be more responsible in the way we do business and address this issue because it's not getting addressed by itself. So whether it's pledges, you know, values, decisions you make, and it's not just a U.S. thing. It's a developed countries thing that we're seeing. That whether it's this social fabric or this social fabric, it's a manifestation of the same, which you articulately described, which is just it's a function of the capitalism and the globalization put together, and we have to step back and figure out a solution because it's no use us all living well if the rest of society ain't there. It isn't going to be as fun, right? It's fun for a while, but it's getting to a point where we've all got to figure out a solution to get everybody to a certain level.
Well, I agree with you. I tell people I do not want to live in a barbed wire security compound in my McMansion while my fellow neighbors are struggling. I don't think that that's the right social contract. You know, whatever you guys think of Henry Ford, and he was a very rough guy, and some people thought he was a racist or an anti-Semite, he said something about social engineering that I think is very practical and very sound. They once asked him, well, how are you paying your workers? And he said, well, you know what? I'm paying my workers enough so that they can afford the car that they're producing. And oh, by the way, I'm making sure they can live in a community where they have a nice single family house and they can send their kids to a good school system, because I don't want them descending on my mansion with tiki torches and pitchforks to blow up my mansion. I know that those workers are aspirational. They're willing to put in a hard day's pay, but I've got to pay them enough so that they feel like they're creating an American dream or the arc of the American dream for their family members. And we have to figure that out. You know, in our societies, we have to figure that out. So, and to your point, and I said this the other night, Paul, on the Columbus Citizens Foundation call, I said, you know what, we talk about philanthropy, it's more of it's got to come from the private sector. The government's not doing it. So we're going to have to step in from the private sector, jobs training initiatives, right-sizing education. All of those things are going to have to come through charitable giving at the corporate and individual level.
Oh, those are good points. Anthony, I want to go back. You mentioned something, you touched on populism before. Would love to get your views at a macro level, and I know we can get into this pretty deep, but as far as populism or nationalism, what's your view of just the state of the world? And I know that's a very broad statement, but with what's happening today, U.S., China, U.S., Europe, would love to get your views on kind of the state of the world markets or economies, for lack of a better word.
Okay, but you got to step back for a second, and you have to study the cycle and arc of global history to understand where we are. And I'll be brief on this, but you'll get this. Barbara Tuchman wrote a book called The Guns of August. And in the book, she was describing the specter and the rise of nationalism and populism in Europe prior to the First World War. And you had all of this bellicosity of rhetoric, and my country's better than your country, and England first, Germany first. All of that sort of rhetoric was bubbling up. And then the alliances that were set up by von Metternich 100 years earlier, they started to fray. You had the incident with the Archduke of Ferdinand where he was shot. It wasn't a minor incident to him, but it was a minor political incident. When you think about the overall action of it. And then you had a war. Everybody thought the war was going to last 3 or 4 months. It ended up lasting 4.5 years, killed 40 million people. By the way, we're still fighting that war. I can explain to you that if you have an interest in it. But why am I bringing that up? What happens is when we lose our wartime memory, our living memory of the war, people start to lose the wartime memory, and concomitantly, you see a rise of populism and nationalism. Why? Well, if I'm in Germany in 1955, my country was completely wiped out from the war. I lost loved ones and family members. It's 1955. I believe in the European Economic Union. I don't want to see this happen again in my lifetime. So we're soldering ourselves together. After the Napoleonic Wars, von Metternich set up the template for the peace treaty. And that peace treaty lasted more or less 1815. There was a small war in 1848 in Europe, but it more or less lasted 100 years. But as the living memory of that war, as those people died off, the citizens and the veterans, they died off, you got the nationalism, and then you went into the First and Second World War. Now, the Second World War is 75 years out, guys. And so what's happening is there's no leadership. There's no statesmen that remember the horror of that war that are actually in political positions right now. And so that's happening at the same time that we're creating this income divide, which is creating and fueling the anger. And remember what politicians do. They want to be in power. So politicians are mostly barometric pressure readings. They weigh the measurement of the people. They put their finger to the wind, and they go towards where the wind is. Very few politicians are into leadership, where they stop and they say, okay, everybody calm down. Let me explain the context of what's going on. And we have to figure out a way for comity and peace. We have to figure out a way to dial down this rhetoric. And so when you sit here today, it's an 80-year cycle. We're back to where Barbara Tuchman was discussing this. Barbara Tuchman's book is fascinating, by the way. It's Guns of August. Teddy White, the journalist, asked Jackie Kennedy, what was President Kennedy reading? What was on his nightstand before he died in November of '63? She said, well, it was Barbara Tuchman's book, The Guns of August. It became a bestseller as a result of that. I read the book when I was 21. I reread the book 2 years ago after I'd gotten fired from the White House because I wanted to see what Mark Twain said about history. It doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And we're rhyming with that error right now. So now 2 seconds on the economy. I don't know, I'm probably in overtime, but I'm Italian, Aversano. I was going to be long-winded.
No, we're good.
Right, but I just
it's all good.
I just want to explain this piece to you. You're sitting here now. Every country's angsted up. Every country is feeling that China first, America first, Germany first, sort of a movement. And we got to calm it down. We got to get the right leadership in place to calm it down and sort of restate the principles necessary. And it's almost like a version 2.0 of the post-World War II architecture to calm it down so that we can create another century of peace and prosperity. Imagine that century, guys. Imagine the exponential growth in technology, the changing over to sustainable energy. Imagine all the things that we can do in the next century if we don't kill ourselves. So that's my message. You know, it's going to be a fight right now. We're very positioned against each other, but we have to figure out a way to calm it down. We have to figure out a way to work with each other. We may not like the Chinese, and they may not like us. We may be sore at each other and clashing, but guess what? We need each other. Imagine that. Okay, it's almost a biblical story that way. We need each other, and we're almost going to be forced by the universe to find a way to get along if we want prosperity and peace for both sides of the world.
Makes a lot of sense.
Before we break, I got to ask this one question. In the U.S., you've got the two parties, but you've got a number of Republicans now that are going to join the Biden camp. Is that a sign that there could be an opportunity for bipartisanship in the next cycle? And is that something where in the U.S. people come together and start to attack some of the fundamental problems that have gone bare, as you said, for the last 20, 30 years?
So really good question, Tone. I don't know the answer to that question, so I can only surmise a few things. People like myself are voting for Joe Biden. We have the greatest schism in the Republican Party since Jerry Ford and Ronald Reagan went after each other in 1976. We have to reform this party. I've taken the position, if Joe Biden wins and there's a defeat of Trumpism and the personality cult surrounding Trumpism, we can then get together as a party and try to heal ourselves and figure out a way to open the tent demographically. If the president wins again, I feel not only will the country be divided, I can answer your question, no chance for any bipartisanship under his leadership. And I feel that the Republican Party has the risk of becoming a minority party for a generation because of who they're angled for demographically. We need to open up that party. We need to give that party fresh ideas. We need to energize that party in a different way so it can stay competitive with the Democratic Party as we are changing the landscape of America demographically. So I hope that that would happen. I'm certainly going to try to help make that happen if Vice President Biden wins. But we don't know. We don't know. We're in a very tribal society right now, and we have leadership that has figured out by staying in their lane, staying in their tribe, helps them sustain power. And they're afraid to cross over and connect with each other because they think that could cause them to get ousted by their respective tribes. So we don't know the answer to that. Maybe the 78-year-old Joe Biden will be like, STFU, I won't say it out loud, and doesn't care, and he'll just go ahead and do it. We need that sort of transformative post-partisan leader.
All right. Well, listen, before we let you out of the bunker, last question.
Hey, Paulie, there's no food in the bunker? I mean, you're Italian.
There's no food in the bunker.
I thought
Sorry.
you guys were going to have like a home delivery for me of like some kind of veal parmesan or something.
Guys, I'm talking to you guys.
I'm just rendering
a little antipasta.
Look, I know you got more famous people coming on than me, but I hope you have like home delivery of food, Paulie. I mean, come on, man. We're in the bunker.
We'll take that under advisement. We need to do that.
All right. Just put that in the suggestion box, basically. That's all.
Put it in the suggestion box, right? What's next for the Mooch? What should we be looking out for with you? What's your next move?
Well, listen, I'm dug in. I gotta fix the performance problem at SkyBridge, which we're going to do. I'm dug in. I got the wirehouses are very flaky. We had a bad month, so Merrill Lynch put a sell on our fund, which is ridiculous. That's obviously a sign of a bottom. When that sort of capitulation happens. So I've got to go out now and build a whole new mechanism of distribution for the firm, which I'm obviously going to do. Last time we had a fiasco. I ended up buying Citibank's fund of funds business. Maybe I'll acquire something here in this current fiasco. So the next 2 to 3 years, I'm missile locked on SkyBridge and making sure that that's right. I'm going to stay politically active. I get people calling SkyBridge saying they hate my politics and they're firing me. Fire me. Fire me. Okay, my attitude is I'm politically active because I love my country. Okay, this isn't about left or right for me. It's about right or wrong. Where I grew up, a lot about my family's history. I have lived a good part of the American dream, thank God. And I want to help see if we can make that happen for other people. So I'm going to stay opinionated. I'm motivated to be opinionated. And if it's bad for business or good for business, I actually don't care because I know it's good for my soul. And so, Paul, you'll be hearing more of me whether you like it or not.
Well,
and
listen.
yes, I just want everybody to know I am naked from the waist down. I just want to make everybody have that visual before we leave the bunker. That's my fashion statement.
There you go.
Quarantine. Brioni on top, nothing on the bottom. Okay, just want to make sure everybody knows.
Business on top, party on the bottom.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, thank you so much for making the time. Really appreciate it. You're a good friend to our firm, and thank you for joining us today and sharing your views.
Congratulations on everything you guys have built, and I wish you unbelievable success going forward. God bless.
Thank you. See you. Thanks, Tony. See you guys.